Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has made history. As you decide 2012, the Republican became the first governor in U.S. history to win a recall election. He defeated Democratic challenger Tom Barrett with 53% of the vote. And joining us this morning to break down the recall election results, St. Norbert College political science professor Charlie Jacobs. Good morning.
Good morning.
Watched it pretty closely, did you, yesterday?
Yes, I did.
What did you, let's talk about that margin of victory. Throughout the day, what I was hearing is that it was a dead heat. Didn't turn out that way.
It didn't, but you have to remember that the exit polls is what we're showing the closer race. But exit polls, just like any typical poll, has a margin of error. And so the margin of error for the exit polls was about 4%. So really what we saw is the results that we saw at the end of the night last night were within that margin of error. And they were very close to what was being produced by the various outlets across the state. St. Norbert College, the Marquette poll, all of them were showing this kind of 5 to 7 to 8% distance between the two candidates. So it seems as though the polls were just about right.
And I was just going to say, the last time you were in here, we were talking about those polls, and those numbers are very similar to what actually happened. So I thought that was very interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about those exit polls. Who's voting for Barrett? Who's voting for Walker?
What we saw was that those groups that voted in a majority for Barrett tended to be the young, those who were under 30. Women in large numbers voted for Barrett, so too did African Americans. What you saw, the main area of support for Walker were whites and men who voted in very large numbers for Walker last night and yesterday.
Well, let's keep this graphic up for a second. This is the county breakdown throughout the state. Can you explain to us what this means right here? We've got 60 in red, 12 in blue, but that doesn't mean, I mean, it's still close because some of those blues are Madison, Milwaukee. Exactly.
I mean, what you see is a tendency that we often see in politics, which is urban areas tend to vote more Democratic. Part of that reason is that urban areas, generally speaking, you see people with lower socioeconomic status, and those, generally speaking, vote more Democratic. And I think what you're seeing up north, even though it's a rural area, and rural areas voted in very large numbers for Walker, the northern areas of Wisconsin have seen some really hard economic times, and there's high unemployment in the northwest corner of the state. So I think that since they haven't yet seen the rebound that Walker talks about in the policies and the reforms that he's instituted, that they were much more willing to listen to Barrett's message, and it resonated with them.
Charlie, were there people who voted yesterday who did not vote? Was there a large number of people who voted yesterday did not vote in 2010?
We saw about 13% of those who showed up at the polls yesterday didn't vote in 2010. And about 54% in the exit polls indicated that they voted for Barrett. So a small majority went for Barrett. Obviously, there were people for whom politics wasn't important in 2010 who saw this as a very important race. I think one of the questions going forward is what percentage of those people will return to the polls? Will they be disappointed? Will they be excited about the outcome? Will they come back in November or for future elections?
So what does this mean now about Wisconsin's state of mind? Are we just a divided state now?
Well, I think because of what we saw in the Senate outcome, or the potential Senate outcome in Lehman's district and Weingardt's district, we could see the Senate going to the Democrats. And I think that is going to have a lot to do with the tone and tenor of the political debate and whether or not there's going to be accommodations from each side so that we have more balanced policy going forward, because we have both of the parties talking to each other instead of sort of talking past each other.
What's next for Walker? What does he do in the next 2 years?
Well, I think that, again, we have to see the outcome of the one Senate race. He has said in the past that he, in sort of self-reflective way, made some mistakes, especially with the collective bargaining, that maybe he didn't consult with enough of the important players in the process. And so that he has to be more cognizant of introducing his ideas and trying to bring people to his point of view, which he believes is the correct point of view. So I think if the Senate goes Democratic, you'll see him reach out in that way. I think it's sort of a genuine sentiment on his part, and if he loses the Senate, he's going to have to work harder to make sure that he brings both sides of the table to some conclusions about the reforms he wants to institute.
And what about Tom Barrett? Is this the last we see of him running for governor?
Well, I mean, he's still mayor, so he's still going to be in the public eye. I think that it's hard to overcome two statewide losses like this. I don't think his political career is over, and I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him running again for some statewide office.
All right. Now, next, Charlie's going to stick around. We're going to talk to him again in the next half hour. Let's delve into that state Senate situation a little bit more then, and we'll talk about voter turnout and yesterday's historic recall election. Thanks for your perspective.